It's so surprising.
Right.
Hi, this is A from Tennessee. I'm calling to ask a question about John 20, verse 24 to 29. It's basically Jesus seems to shame doubting Thomas out of actually thrusting his hands into his uh, side and into the piercings because it doesn't actually say that he actually did it. It just says he saw and believed. So, I mean, it's common, even going back to ancient Egypt, for magicians to have ways of pretending that body parts were harmed or severed. So, is this the only proof that Jesus died and came back to life? Is someone seeing and believing?
There's something happening here that most people miss. So it's very striking that the story with doubting Thomas, that's so John 20 is really where John should end. 21 is probably a later addition, an added chapter. But that's not germane. What is germane is that this story appears nowhere else in the Christian Bible. So how did it get there? Why is it there? And it's not only the only example of this in the Christian Bible, but it's in the last gospel chronologically. The book of John was written later than the synoptic gospels. So why does a story like this, where we have the most visceral contact with the physical resurrected Jesus at the very end of the gospels? This is very, very late stuff. So the book of John is written at the very end of the first century. This is very late. So why does such a story with such a visceral resurrection narrative? And just to contrast this, the book of Mark, which is the earliest of the four gospels chronologically, really ends with Mark 16, verse 8, where there is no appearances of Jesus to the disciples. Like, you have none of this stuff. In fact, Mark 16:8 ends with the women who were there just frightened at what they had heard that Jesus rose and were so scared that they didn't say anything to anyone. The last 12 verses that you now see in a Christian Bible is a later edition. And the early texts of the New Testament don't have all the later passages, which means Mark 16, verse 9 through 20 is later. What a difference that is. So this really is a pushback against Paul. So I'd like you to think of it as a growth and a transformation in Christianity. So Paul's resurrection accounts, which are the earliest resurrection accounts, it's the earliest Christian literature to survive, the idea that the tomb was empty does not exist, never mentioned. Because in the ancient Greek thought, you can resurrect from the dead, and that doesn't mean your body is not in the tomb, because it's a spiritual resurrection. And Paul says so in 1 Corinthians 15. He doesn't use that language, but he makes it very clear that whatever resurrects is a spiritual body, strikingly different than what died. What happens is you can chart this off where the later the gospel, the more tangible Jesus' physical body is resurrected. So in Luke, which is probably 10 years earlier than John, probably. There are some people who place Luke into the second century, but we'll just keep it conservative. So Luke, you have Jesus eating burned fish with the disciples, and the point is made in Luke 24, like what kind of spirit eats and drinks as, obviously I am. So look at the story of Thomas actually feeling the body of Jesus as a pushback against another iteration of Christianity, which was Pauline, that the resurrected Jesus was a spirit, which would have been much more in line with Greek thinking. This is the one area where Paul lost and his opponents won, those who thought that it should be more in line with the Jewish view of the resurrection of the dead. So thank you very much for your question. If you enjoyed this program, please like and subscribe.
אדון עולם אשר מלך
בטרם כל יציר נברא ועת נעשה בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה